Good morning. I hope you're having a great day, and welcome to Coast View, the show that celebrates the men and women who are working so hard to make coastal Mississippi, and frankly, Mississippi for that matter, such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, I have mentioned on my show a couple of times that I lease land, a little over 2,000 acres in the Mississippi Delta for hunting purposes. I've got great relationships with one particular family, the Dunn family, up in the Mississippi Delta, and man, just absolutely incredible friends. We work together to improve habitat and do all kinds of neat things that will help make the hunting better. I have a little family. It's a little family hunting club, and not the traditional hunting club. We just call it a hunting club, but it's close family members and some of my closest friends. And anyway, we have a lot of time in the Delta, a lot of fun in the Delta. I love the Mississippi Delta. I love spending time there, and can't wait to go back. And it's just a special place. Well, the main farm that we leased was sold to a German company for a lot of money. I was blown away that I was oblivious to the reality that a foreign government could actually come in here and buy critical farmland in America. I was blown away by that. Then I started to do a little bit of research, and I discovered that it could be a German company, or it might not be a German company. It could be some sort of investment group that's buying land for the Chinese. Who knows? And I'm not trying to make people concerned about the Chinese. I'm concerned in general that any foreign country can come in and own land in America. So with that said, and then of course with the tornadoes and all this swirling around that, I realized that I had not met with my friend Andy Gipson in a while, who's the commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. And I wanted him to join me, and we're going to talk about this foreign purchase of land issue in Mississippi. An important actually step has been taken to form a study group. We're going to come to that in just a second, but before we go any further, let me welcome Andy to Coast View. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm doing really good. Hey, listen, I've talked a lot about the tornado because, as you know, Mississippians are incredible, resilient people. And after Hurricane Katrina, which I had the opportunity to be a leader in the aftermath as the publisher of the Sun Herald, and then working with Governor Haley Barbour on the recovery effort, I have made lots of observations about what is actually in the heart and soul of Mississippians. And too often the narrative for Mississippi is rooted in our historic past. It's not rooted in the present day scenario. But when you think about what's taking place in the Mississippi Delta as we speak, and all the sort of socioeconomic and political boundaries are blown down, what you see in the heart and soul of Mississippians is an incredibly inspiring thing, isn't it?
It is. We see the very worst when those storms roll through, and we see the devastation, but almost immediately you see the resiliency of our people and the response, not only in the immediate community, but all over the state to come and help and send help and chainsaws and water and food supplies and baby diapers and all the things that we all know we need in a time of catastrophe. So we've seen that all firsthand recently in the last week, and it looks like there's going to be another long road of recovery, but we'll be there with them all the way through till Rolling Fork and Amory and everybody in between is rebuilt.
Well, listen, you're in a unique position because as in your position, when we think about agriculture, people tend just to think about sort of the farmers, the farmers that are planting food that we eat, et cetera. But you're also talking about tree farms and, massive devastation in trees along the corridor that this tornado hit. But what's inspiring to me, Andy, and you can talk about these aspects, but what's inspiring to me, I had someone on my show from the Delta in the last few days, and what she reported to me was really cool. And it's that farmers were showing up. I mean, the wind had not even hardly calmed down yet. The thought that some people were pinned in their homes, and all this, we're in planting season right now, and all this heavy equipment with farmers, driving them in, suddenly showed up and was just helping to sort through it all. That's that's part of this thing that we're talking about. It's part of this resiliency factor that's so critical. But you've seen that, haven't you?
I have. And, agriculture has always been the Mississippi's number one, the part of our economy. It is number one in terms of employment. And it's number one in terms of the work ethic that our farmers have that, no matter what, you got to get the crop in. You got to get the seed in the ground. You got to tend to the livestock, no matter what. And our farmers, in a time of crisis like this, they know that no matter what, we got to respond and we got to get the job done. And so I was in Rolling Fork Monday of last week, witnessing firsthand all the response, both the relief organizations, and we appreciate all of those, but also the local farmers. In fact, it was a farmer who took me and showed me firsthand all the devastation from where that tornado began on the west side of Rolling Fork, southwest, all the way through. And it's farmers who have been coordinating so much of the relief there, even at the same time as trying to get the seed in the ground for this year's crop. So it's a tremendous job. It's a terrible tragedy. It couldn't have come at a worse time for our farmers, but we will get through it. We will rise above it, and we'll be better for it at the end of the day.
Well, you're right, though. Farmers are so resilient. I've had the opportunity over many years, to get to know these farmers, so many farmers, well. And, they've had to deal with floods and too much rain and muddy conditions and droughts and, you name it. Think about how many tractors they've seen stuck along the way and what they have to do to try to get those out. There's no issue too big that farmers haven't had to be innovative in dealing with. So when you have something like a tornado and they appear, they are incredibly industrious people, aren't they?
They are. You know what I noticed, because I was in Rolling Fork that day, the same farmers that I have met with now for years to talk about the perennial flooding in the South Delta. It's the same farmers, the same community that has withstood these devastating floods year after year after year. The same farmers who got in their boats and drove across the flood to get to the other side of the field. These same farmers are the ones that were responding on the ground to help. So it puts a exclamation point on the reality that our people are tough. Mississippians are tough. We do, as Haley Barber used to say, we pull our bootstraps up and we get the job done. And we're going to get through this as well. And we'll be standing in solidarity with all the affected communities from here on out. And I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have more storms. We just had some over this past weekend up in Tupelo and Pontotoc. Had a tornado in McGee. It was not a major one, but this is storm tornado time of the year, and we're used to it and we're prepared for it, and we'll get through it.
So when again, timber's a big thing. I saw a nice reel that someone posted on social media, and it was a short video of someone on a heavy piece of equipment looking out over some trees standing, some trees, half of them down, some trees fully down. And the caption read, as a general rule, timber companies don't like to sort of get into a situation like this because it's so hard to sort through it all. And the finale of the post was simply that, but we got to do what we got to do. And it was, the tractor moves forward toward this devastation. But man, they've got to try to figure out how to save what they can save in this moment too, don't they?
If it can be salvaged, it needs to be salvaged. You don't know how much that tree twisted in the wind, even if it didn't come to the ground, or like the pines snapping off. Your hardwoods blow over, root ball and everything just blow over, but you never know, and you really can't tell till you get in there if that tree is twisted, it cracked inside. Certainly, it may not be suitable for rafters or that type of lumber anymore. But we got to salvage what we can. Timber is historically Mississippi's #2 product, right behind poultry. Recently, it's been #3 because the price of soybeans has gone so high. But it is not only one of our largest products that we produce as a state, both softwood, southern yellow pine, but also hardwood, almost in equal proportions. And as I traveled through the area this past week, it's all been affected. And that whole area. A lot of people planted that, counting on it for retirement or counting on it for education, and it's just not there. So we salvage it, and then we'll replant, and we'll move on. But it's definitely a major impact, and it always is. Anytime the wind blows hard.
Andy, one of the things that is true, and that is that you mentioned the price of soybeans, that the market's always decided sort of what farmers were going to plant, but what we would generally see is a rotation of crops of some sort. And I've seen actually that change pretty dramatically, especially with the soybean prices being up high. When we get on the other side, I'd be interested to get your perspective on how sort of the markets and the worldwide situations changing what people are planting. And then we're going to talk about this foreign purchasing of land in Mississippi. That's a big time thing to be concerned about. We'll see you with Andy Gipson when we get on the other side. See you. Welcome back to Coast View. We're visiting with my friend Andy Gipson, who's the commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. He's a farmer and a lawyer and a minister and farmer state representative, and so he brings into these discussions about the rural communities, especially of Mississippi, has a unique perspective and stays in touch with farmers. We're going to talk about coming up here in just a second about this foreign purchase of land in Mississippi, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. But before we go any further, I just, this whole notion of crop rotation, I've seen it just get turned on its head. I mean, we're used to you'd have corn and then maybe soybeans and then cotton. And now we're seeing we had a lot of corn last year, Now you're seeing soybeans getting planted all over the place. But is this unusual, or do you see these spikes like that if you were to go back over the last 20 years?
Well, I think the reality is there's still some crop rotation going on. Farmers who have land and they may plant this field and that crop and the other one in this next year. But what has happened is these futures and the predictions of the prices and soybeans, the price and the demand worldwide, for example, that's what's driving this price increase for soybeans. And that's what took it from number 3 commodity of Mississippi to number 2, surpassing forestry for the first time just a couple of years ago. You also had the interruption globally of soybean production due to a lot of different reasons. And then the Ukraine war and Russia war over there that has interrupted grain supplies. So there's just a greater demand. And I think our farmers have gotten really good and really skilled at looking into the future, so to speak, and seeing what that's going to look like. And then I do know that we're going to have a lot less cotton that will be planted this year in Mississippi as compared to other years. We saw those estimates here early on, and I'm hearing it everywhere. It's soybeans and it's corn and not so much cotton this year. But I think the farmers who do have enough land to justify it and do that crop rotation, it is a good idea because it does replenish different soil nutrients, different crops, put different things back in the ground or take things out of the ground. It's a great practice. But at the end of the day, I mean, our farmers right now are just trying to survive the double cost that it is to raise a crop compared to just a year and a half ago. The inflationary pressures that consumers feel are magnified for farmers, and we've got to keep the farms going. We got to keep producing our food, our fiber, and our shelter, no matter what it takes. And so I always tell folks, thank a farmer when you see them, but now more than ever, thank a farmer because they are spending twice as much in terms of fuel and fertilizer and all the other ag inputs to raise a crop that hopefully will pay for itself and then have a little bit to live on for another year. Soybeans is where it's at this moment in history, and so that's what you're seeing out there in the field.
I talked to a young man that I know who actually went over to do some support work for the war in Ukraine in Poland, and he sent a picture of driving along an area of Poland on the Ukrainian border. And it looked like the Mississippi Delta. Mm-hmm. I mean, everywhere you look were just fields of ag land, even had some shooting houses, here and there. But, for people who don't understand this, Ukraine is a major producer of ag products. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Actually, it produced before the war about 1/3 of the world's supply of grain. And so when you look at that, they were supplying that entire part of the world with corn and wheat from their area, from their production. And when that was interrupted, it just increased the demand, including here in the United States, for what we have to provide. And it's having a lasting impact. When all that started, I thought that war would be over in a matter of days. I thought, wow, Russia will go in and take this. It's not turned out at all like I predicted, and it just seems to be dragging on. And so those supply chain interruptions are still having an effect on the entire supply worldwide of our food supplies.
And that's impacting prices, and that's impacting what farmers are doing, and they just keep on keeping on. It's just amazing to watch a Mississippi farmer in action. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I leased 3 separate farms. I did this past year, 3 separate farms. And one of the farms had about 1,500 acres of other stuff. It's, bottoms and trees and forests, et cetera, and about 400 acres of ag land. In this particular case, a German company came in and bought the ag land. And it started sort of a domino effect of issues that I ultimately said, I mean, we could have kept it. We could have kept the land, but it was becoming too complicated for us. And the other 2 farms that we had were just too good. And so I've renewed the leases at the other 2 farms, and I did not renew the lease on the main farm. But in the process of learning about this, man, they paid probably $2,000 more per acre than what the going rate was for that kind of land at that moment. And then I thought, well, how do we know for sure that it's a German company? So look, I'm just kind of kicking it off. You've made your own observations, but why is this something we all need to be thinking about?
Well, it's something that is really critically important. If you go back to the reason that America is the world power that it is today, it's because we are the world leader in food production and food security. It is our land that literally is feeding and clothing the world. If it were not for America, the breadbasket of the world, many places around the globe would starve to death. We produce our own food, our own fiber, our own shelter through our timber, but we also produce a lot for the world. So that is the core of our strength. And when you see what's happening around the world, and we got this report in 2021 from USDA that these foreign governments were buying up our farmland, it kind of made everybody's antenna go up, mine included. And I want to, for the record, I am against 110% against any foreign government owning land, our agricultural land that produces our food, our fiber, and our shelter. People fight wars. Russia's fighting a war in Ukraine to try to take the land of Ukraine for the very reason that we're talking about, food production, so it can feed its people. People fight wars to win land, and here we are in the United States letting in many cases, our enemies come in here, write a check and buy our land, and then we have nothing to offer. We have nothing to sell to other world governments if they own our food production. So we got this report in 2021 of USDA putting out that about 3% now of all American farmland is owned by foreign countries. And that does not include these investment companies that are formed, and nobody knows who really is behind the curtain of these companies that are swooping in, paying way more than fair market value for our farmland. Like you mentioned, you saw that report. I've heard of other reports in excess of $7,000, $8,000 an acre for farmland that in a normal market would not bring that. So you got to ask yourself why. And it's really common sense. If these foreign governments can buy the land and own it themselves and control the production of food, then they don't have to deal with us anymore, right? They own it, and they actually can win the battle for that farm, for that piece of ground, without ever firing a shot. The great concern is, although we're concerned about any government owning our land, but the great concern is that our great enemy, like China, would swoop in here and somehow be behind some of these purchases, financing these purchases. And the answer is we just don't know who's really controlling these pieces and parcels of land that are being bought up. I'll give you some quick statistics in Mississippi if you want them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think it's important that on this list that Andy's about to share, keep in mind China. Just keep in mind China. We're going to come back to this in just a second. But right. Yeah, share that list.
So looking at America as far as who is owning our land, which countries are controlling American agricultural lands. Canada is at the top of that list, owning 31%. Most of that is forest land. The Netherlands own 12%. Italy owns 7%. Italy, 7%. United Kingdom, Great Britain, 6%. Germany, 6%. And then these countries that I'm about to mention all hold at least 500,000 acres apiece of farmland. Portugal, France, Denmark, Luxembourg, Mexico, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Japan, and Belgium. So nowhere on that list is the word China, but we know that China is really good at operating through other countries. I'll give you one example. They will import some of our commodities by making arrangements with other nations to import them there, and then they wind up going to China, for example. I know that to be a fact. In Mississippi, the number one holder of our farmland, forest land, is the Netherlands, and they own over 700,000 acres of woods in Mississippi. The grand total for all the land owned by foreign countries in Mississippi today is 2.9%. 2.9% of our farmland owned by foreign governments. So the legislature passed this study committee. We're going to be working on it and get a good report and some recommendations by December 1st.
Let's do this with Andy Gipson, the Commissioner for Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. We're going to talk about this important study group that they put together, and also his thoughts about why America hasn't really latched onto this as a major problem. Maybe it's something we all need to be talking about. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. I have my friend Andy Gipson, the Commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, and we're talking about this whole issue of foreign purchase of land in Mississippi. And when we went to break, we were talking about the legislature has now put together this study group. We're going to talk about what they plan to do. But what's interesting to me, Andy, is that this experience that I had with Germany coming in and buying the ag land of one of the farms that I leased was really the first time that I'd ever even heard of this. Of course, I've been around the block a few times. I've been publisher of newspapers, et cetera. It immediately occurred to me that this may not be a good thing. But the other thing that occurred to me was they were paying such a premium for it. I don't blame the farmers who were involved in this for selling. And so, gosh, to speak out against it, you're stopping the opportunity for some farmers potentially in the future to get these incredible premiums for their land. And I get that. But to me, my immediate observation was simply about strategic importance of us owning our own land in America. So, but here I make these observations. And then, like the very first legislative session, that since I learned about this, you guys take it up as an issue. Yep. And so how long has this been percolating?
Well, years ago, Congress passed a law that required the USDA to compile this information and to report it to Congress every, I think, 10 years as to how much land the foreign governments of the world own in America. This 2021 report that came out showed that although it's been going on for some time, there's a big uptick in the amount that's being purchased. And I think it's being driven by the fact that, let's face it, the world population is growing. It's getting harder and more difficult to feed a nation's population, much less the world. And so countries of the world are trying to figure out how to get a piece of our vast food production here in America. Our food supply, our food production, I would argue, is the greatest asset that Americans have. We have a lot of great assets, and oil and other things, but a country that cannot feed itself is the weakest country in the world. And so these foreign lands are buying up pieces of Mississippi and Texas. Texas has the most foreign-owned land, it turns out. And we're looking into it. The legislature created this study committee, and House Bill 280, Representative Becky Curry was the author of that. And I'm on that, and we're tasked with getting this data together specific for Mississippi. I'm already working on it. The other members of the committee include the House and Senate Agriculture Chairman, the House and Senate Judiciary A Chairman. The governor has an appointment, the lieutenant governor has an appointment, and the speaker has an appointment who will be representing Farm Bureau. So all of us sitting around a table will be discussing what this means. There is a fine line. I mean, let's face it, the people do have private property rights to sell their property. But just like you have zoning in a city, there are some concerns that the city can have or the county could have to put in place some restrictions. We don't have anything to prohibit in most of America foreign governments from coming in and buying up our farmland. One thing that we do have in Mississippi that I've already uncovered is we have a law that's been on the books since 1936, I think, that prohibits foreign governments from owning more than 320 acres of non-industrial land. So that's something that's on the books, but it's not being enforced. And it hasn't been enforced apparently for decades. So here we are today, about 3% of our farmland in Mississippi turns out to be owned by foreign governments. That's a significant number. It's not a huge number, but we've got to do what we can do to make sure we keep American agriculture American, in my view. That's what I'm bringing to this table at the study committee, and keep Mississippi agriculture owned by Mississippi farmers and Mississippi farm families. So we're working on that. We are already producing the information that's going to be needed to make these decisions. And then we'll be getting that out to the full committee. I would expect we probably would have a first meeting in July. And at that meeting, I'll be making a presentation on what we know today as of the state of the ownership of our farmland in Mississippi. And I'll make one last point, and I'll turn it back to you. I'm in the international trade business. It's my job as Commissioner of Agriculture to sell our products wherever I can around the world. If countries around the world own our land and our food and our fiber and shelter, we have nothing to sell them. So that puts me out of a job as far as international trade is concerned. We've got to have that right and that ability to produce our own products and then use them for our own needs and also offer them to the world where it's necessary.
So you mentioned that the Congress actually established that the USDA would compile this data. And what I'm curious about is that over the course of time, let's say going back 20 years, has there been do you have data sort of laid out that way, number one? And has there been a peak more recently in purchasing?
Yes. The uptick began about 2015. And I'm looking at the report right now that shows foreign land holdings in America have gone up by an average of 2.2 million acres per year since 2015. So on average, every year that goes by, some foreign interest is buying 2.2 million. Again, this doesn't include investment companies that we don't know who really controls them. This is just who we know these foreign governments are. And so the data covers foreign-owned land and U.S. subsidiary-owned land. So that foreign-owned land is about 29.1 million. That's directly controlled by the foreign governments, and then subsidiaries of those governments own another 11.7 million acres. And it's not just farmland, it's also forest land. We talked about timber and the value of that earlier in the show. In Mississippi, the Netherlands owns over 700,000 acres of land that are forest land. And it's interesting that all these developments have happened, these increases since 2015, and something's going on. And I think it doesn't take a whole lot more than common sense to figure out how to connect these dots and see what these governments are up to.
Yeah, I remember from my publishing days, in the newspaper business for most of my career, one of the key companies that we did business with for newsprint, the paper that you read, that the newspaper was printed on, was Abitibi-Price, and they were out of Canada. And you mentioned that Canada had holding of the total amount of foreign-owned land, over 30% of that was owned by Canada. My guess is that's probably the majority of that is timber.
In fact, it is. It turns out to be that. So and the other factor that we have to remember is there are some treaties in place that were put in place some after World War I, some after World War II, that actually the United States granted some of these countries the ability to do this. Some of those treaties are old, and they probably had a good purpose back then, but that's probably exactly how Canada got in here to do that. I know that there's a treaty that governs the Netherlands' relationship with the United States. So those are bigger issues we've got to look at as we move ahead, and see how to tackle this. But in Mississippi, I think we've got a pretty clear law. We just got to figure out how to enforce that law to keep thousands and thousands of our farmland acres every year being sold to foreign governments.
I had the opportunity, Governor Barber asked me to speak at the Beau Rivage. He was hosting a meeting this year. That year he was chairman of this organization, and what it was is the 7 Southeast states and the Canadian provinces have this organization. And what I came to know as I prepared for this dinner speech that I gave, that our number one trading partner and most states' number one trading partner is Canada. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised that there might be a treaty in place that would engage some of this. And that's the kind of thing you say, okay, that's okay, maybe. But some of the stuff as it relates to other countries like China and Germany and who knows who else, it may not be okay. Well, so there are fine lines here. Somebody's got to get in and sort through all this, aren't they?
And the world stage is shifting. You saw China and Russia team up last week with the visit of the Chinese Prime Minister. It's clear that that they have treaties as well with some of these same countries, and we don't know what all those entail. But it's clear to me that that China, at least, is making a move to become the world superpower in terms of currency, in terms of land, in terms of military might and arrangements with other countries. So I think that this is the right time. We probably should have been looking at this before now, but we definitely need to get this right today as we look to the next years ahead for America and for our food security. Food security is national security. You can't feed yourself, you're toast. That's the bottom line.
Hey, it'll be interesting since the study committee was announced. I wonder if there's been a run on selling with the thought that maybe there could be some governor placed on this at some point. It'd be interesting to know that.
It would.
So anyway, we're talking with my friend Andy Gipson, who's the commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll find out what the heck else is going on in his world. Because if you were to segment out the things he's responsible for, it's a multifaceted role. We'll see you after this. I've enjoyed this conversation with Andy Gipson, the Commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. It's really good to be able to connect with state leaders from time to time just to see what's going on in their world. And, Andy, one of the things that I saw recently, you actually posted, it might have been just in the last day or two, a picture of you at this big table meeting with your department heads, a lot of people in the room, but that gives you a sense of there's a lot to say grace over when you're in your role. What are the kind of things you guys are thinking about these days?
Well, that was our monthly staff meeting. We meet once a month, the first Monday, usually of every month. We get together, and it's all of our division heads, whether we're thinking about the petroleum division, the regulatory division, consumer protection, weights and measures. We've got a marketing division that works on the international trade projects that we've been tracking. And in fact, I'll be working on this summer. We've got folks at the fairgrounds that do the day-to-day activities over there, the Mississippi Ag and Forestry Museum, and then our Genuine Mississippi program. We were talking, one of the things about that meeting yesterday or the other day was how we can help further in this tornado response. So we've sent a truck loaded down with supplies to Rolling Fork and another one to Amory. We partner with the Department of Public Safety to receive donations from just regular people here at the fairgrounds, and then we're trucking them, and they're trucking them as well to different folks in need. And then we'll be cooking. We have a cooking team that we're sending up to Silver City this week and other places that have been affected. So there's a lot to talk about, whether it's agriculture. We've got a Bureau of Plant Industry. This is the time for the seed to be going in the ground, so our folks up in Starkville are working on those issues, fertilizer and pesticide division, agriculture and commerce. And then on top of that, we get to cover some of the issues that we deal with on wildlife. We have a wild hog control program that's designed to fight this scourge of invasive and good-for-nothing wild hogs in all 82 counties that our office administers. We train farmers how to use these traps on private farm and on forestry lands. So, yeah, we got a lot going on, and we're proud of the work we do. I view that our job is to keep agriculture strong in Mississippi and keep commerce flowing. And whether it's local commerce at the gas pump, diesel pump, or whether it's international trade, selling our products around the world, we're focused on that every day.
That is a lot to say grace over. There is no doubt about that. You know, I know you have a sort of a regulatory role as it relates to gas pumps and other things related to petroleum products in the state. But how much do you think about the price of gas?
I think about it every day. My sticker saying that we inspected this device within the last year is on every gas pump, and there's a number to call for complaints about quality of fuel, about the quantity that those pumps are dispensing. They should be accurate. There's a very low level of tolerance for any inaccuracy. So we get calls about fuel all the time, but the one thing we don't have any control over is the price. That's the supply and demand. And, one thing that we know for sure, we've got to have oil. We've got to have energy that produces the gas and the diesel and the natural gas and other the carbon forms that we have. You cannot raise a crop of food on battery power. You just can't do it. You've got to have oil supplies, and we appreciate all the great folks on the coast that are working to produce that, and really all around America. So, yeah, we get calls. People ask about the price. If there's a complaint about price gouging, if somebody's really trying to stick it to it, that goes over to the Attorney General's office. So we refer a lot of those calls to our friends at General Fitch's office. But we're here to help you. If you get a complaint or see a problem on the quantity of fuel or the quality of fuel, call us, and we'll send somebody there today to check it out.
Hey, listen, you probably know Austin Golding from Golding Barge Line in Vicksburg.
Yeah.
He's on my show on a regular basis. Young guy in his 30s who's running this company, his family business. Yeah. Major company as it relates to sort of the inland waterways of America and moving petroleum products around, but also, a lot of farmers use them to get their stuff done. We had the issue with the low river last year that they were battling with. But he talks a lot about, America's independence and that we're not being honest with ourselves about the need for refinery capacity going forward, et cetera. And hopefully one day as we're coming to the end of our segments together, hopefully one day we'll get right about our energy policy. There's no question that renewables are in our future, but the reality is we've got to have a defined transition plan so we can quit thinking we can get there tomorrow, which is ridiculous.
That's right. The policies that are being put in place at the federal level are only causing our existing issues to be worse. They're causing prices to go higher. We need more oil rather than less, and we needed it yesterday, not tomorrow. So I hope that hopefully those policies can be adjusted going forward, and we'll keep running the tractors and the trucks up and down the road to make sure products get delivered and products get grown for food, fiber, and shelter.
Then when you think about the relationship between Saudi Arabia and China and OPEC just deciding sort of unilaterally to up their prices or whatever they're going to do, it's troubling. And energy independence for America is really important. Again, most Americans get that we have to protect our environment and have renewable energy, but the question is, how do we get there in a sort of a unified, rational way? Which we're not looking at it rationally these days. Hey, listen, Andy Gipson, it's been a pleasure to visit with you today, my friend.
Same here. Thank you for having me, Ricky. You have a great day, and thank you all the great listeners out there. We appreciate y'all as well.
It's been terrific. It's been very, very good conversation. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
See you. Take care.